Hello, Rockstars, and welcome to day one of the Quilting Plan Challenge. My name is Holly Ann Knight, and it's my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. I am so excited for all of y'all who are here with me live today. I know some of you, like us, are prepping to go to QuiltCon. I know some of you are prepping for big Valentine weekend plans, and yet you've carved out time to be here with me, and that means so much. Just so you know, I am broadcasting from the shop today. We are actively prepping for QuiltCon, and the shop is open, so if you hear background noise, it's just everybody being busy little bees and being creative, okay? Give me a holler if you have not already down in the chat so I can say hello to you. I see Vicky is here from Idaho, Cindy from New Jersey, Grandma Crafter in Michigan. Hello, Nicole. She says, I'm looking forward to this. It's going to help me with what do I do next? Yes, ma'am. Mom KR, Karen in Pennsylvania. Hello, Jan and Penny and Roseanne and another Jan up in Michigan. Jan, I love how you're like, Jan, I am also a Jan, and I lived in Michigan. Carrie in Canada. That makes us officially international today. Excellent. Another Carrie in Wisconsin, Pat in North Carolina, a third Carrie in Montana, all different spellings. Well done, y'all. Eileen in New York. And Jan says, I just popped in to say hello. I know everyone will love this and get moving on those quilts. Listen, y'all are going to hear about Jan as we go on. Jan's story is amazing. Jan went from being so scared of finishing her quilts to being one of the most amazing rock stars I know. And I'm so glad you're here for a bit, babe. Sue in Myrtle Beach, Sandy in Iowa, Leslie in Michigan, Cheryl in Alabama, Roberta in Pennsylvania, the Sandra, yes ma'am, in Texas, own that, Helen in Maryland, Victoria and Deborah and Judy and Kay just down the road. It's so good to see you. Hello, Quinn. How have you had surgery yet? Are you healing? How are you doing? Let's see. JW in Colorado, Mary in Florida, Victoria, Aaron, Sally. I'm trying to catch everyone. Say hi to Chris for me, Quinn. Val in the UK. We're extra international. I love it. Kate in Arizona. Another Jan in Arizona. There's so many of y'all. Welcome, everyone. I'm about to start fumbling over my words. So welcome, Sarah in New Zealand. Amazing. I'm so thrilled that all of y'all are here. Are you ready to dive in? Let's just jump straight into this, shall we? Now, we're going to be here together for about an hour each day. And my goal for you by the end of this weekend is that if you are here right now going, I really want to finish my quilts, but I feel very overwhelmed. I'm not sure how to start. Help. This is my answer to your cry for help. Okay. So by the end of this weekend, you're going to have a plan. You're going to be set up and ready to roll, and you're going to know the next steps that you need to take. Sound good? All right. Let's see. Quinn says surgery's Monday morning. You got this, Rockstar. You're right. I'm so sad you're missing QuiltCon, but it's going to be so good for you to be able to recover and be able to sew and not be in pain. Yes, there are so many of us, aren't there, Jan? So exciting. 106 and counting. Y'all are incredible. Let's dive in. First of all, I have two workbooks for you. I love to do workbooks anytime I teach because I talk a mile a minute. I'm going to go down side quests. I'm going to tell stories, and I'm also going to be trying to share a lot of information with you. And workbooks are my way of giving you a cheat sheet so that you can sit here and enjoy our time together and not have to worry about retaining absolutely everything that flows out of my mouth. Okay. So the first workbook is the Quilting Plan Workbook. You can use that QR code there on the screen, or I'm going to snag the link and drop it in the chat as well. This is the workbook that was emailed to you ahead of time. Okay. So if you've already downloaded that, that's this one. Then I'm going to give y'all a second to snag that one. And on this next slide, we have the Quilt Your First Project with Confidence Workbook. Again, I'm going to drop the link in the chat so it's easy for you to snag these even after the QR code goes by. The Quilting Plan Workbook talks a lot about the theoretical, what am I going to quilt wear? And we're going to be answering that question together. But because I want you to move from what am I going to quilt wear to how do I quilt it, this second workbook is that piece. Okay. So as we move through our weekend together, we're going to start with what do I quilt wear and get you closer and closer to I know how to quilt it and I'm ready to get started. Okay. So download both of those. You'll just click the link. You'll put in your email address. It'll get emailed to you. And the vast majority of what comes out of my mouth, other than the silliness, of course, is going to be in these workbooks. So you have them to review as you actually start quilting. Okay. The other thing that I want you to know, we're almost there. As I said, over the next 3 days, we're going to remove the roadblocks standing between you and finished quilts. I think of all the things that we learn as quilters, right? Anytime I'm teaching new quilters, I get a lot of questions about things like 1/4 inch seams and what is foundation paper piecing and how do curves work. But nothing inspires anxiety like actually quilting your own quilt. And I'm not entirely sure when we as a quilting community started having this mythology of fear around the quilting process, but I am here to break those walls down. I truly believe that if you can write your name, you can quilt your quilts, and I'm going to show you the steps to do that. We're going to use the Confident FMQ framework, and we're going to have you equipped and ready to roll. Our guiding principles for this are simple. The best quilt is a finished quilt, not a perfect one, and you are a quilting rock star. That means you already have the tools that you need. I'm just going to show you how they work as we go through our time together, okay? Allow me to introduce myself properly now that I've yapped at you for 6 whole minutes. As I mentioned, my name is Holly Ann Knight, and I have been teaching since 2017. I've watched thousands of quilters just like y'all develop from nervous beginner quilters to confident free motion quilting and ruler quilting rock stars through my blogs, workshops, and digital courses. You are in exactly the right place to start your quilting journey with me this weekend. When I am not quilting, I am married to the cutie hubster who's in the top right photo here. He's the one with the beard. I insist that he keep that beard even when it bugs him, because otherwise we look like little itty bitty babies. We got married very young. We do have babies of our own. Jim and Ian are down in that lower left-hand photo. And then we have an entire zoo worth of pets at our house. We have 3 cats, we have a fish tank, and we have my fabulous dog, Havana. She's there in the bottom right. She's also here at the shop right now. If a dog walks by, you're going to hear her bark. She's very loud, especially for her size. All right. And if I'm not hanging out with these guys or hanging out at String and Story, then I'm probably out for a run. I'm really into marathoning. I know running a long way, it's not for everyone, but I love it. All right. You, my dear rock stars, are in the right place if, don't worry, you don't have to be a marathoner. You are in the right place if you are scared of ruining your quilts. You are in the right place if you are tired of paying and waiting for long arm quilting and you want a way to do it yourself. This doesn't mean that you will never send a quilt to a long armer again, but you want another option, right? And I say this as someone who does long arm quilting. And you're in the right place if 3, you're embarrassed by your flimsy graveyard. You love piecing, but you know that those tops are starting to pile up and you really want to have a collection of quilts that you and your loved ones can snuggle, not a collection of flimsies that kind of vaguely haunt you from the closet in the sewing room. Okay. By the way, drop in the chat for me. Which of these stands out most for you, right? Like, what is your big anxiety around finishing your quilts? It could be something I listed here. It could be something else. Give me a holler and let me know. Here's the key thing. There's a better way. Right now, you might be feeling scared, tired, embarrassed, or overwhelmed, but I want you to feel joyful, relaxed, and creative, just like you did when you started piecing that very first quilt and you discovered your love of quilting. During our time together, I'm going to show you that better way, one where you can finish more quilts and have a fresh spark to your work, okay? All right, I see a lot of 1s and 2s, a lot of ruining of quilts, the cost, yes. Nicole says, I have a stockpile of flimsies. The time has come. I co-sign that heavily, Nicole. Definitely scared to ruin something. I understand. Number 3, I want to do it. I love that, Pam. All right. Y'all are all in the right place. Congratulations. And here's the thing. In case you hadn't realized yet, you've already done the hardest part. The hardest part is admitting that there's something that you want to do and you're not sure how to learn it, or that you feel overwhelmed and scared about learning it. Because now we get to do it together, and we're going to remove those roadblocks one by one. Okay. Let's see. Carrie says, I hate getting into a project and realizing there was a better way. I'm going to show you. Don't you worry. Val says, deciding what design I should quilt where in each section and getting an idea of the design of the motif. Yes. Perfect. Roseanne says, I'm new to quilting. I've sewn clothes for years, but using a long arm is totally new to me. Yes. And just so you know, whatever machine you're on, whether it's a long arm or a domestic machine, you're going to learn how to quilt your quilts. All right. I love it. Now, I am going to give away the ending a little bit here. So as we go through this weekend, you are going to hear me reference Quilting Rockstar University a lot. That's because it is my favorite thing ever. This is our online membership where we dive far deeper than what we can cover in just 3 days together. Inside Quilting Rockstar University, you have access to detailed videos about how to quilt lots of different motifs. You get to see me quilt on multiple different machines. And it's going to be your next step after our time together this weekend. Okay. I'm going to mention it a lot because we very intentionally designed the Quilting Plan Challenge to give you a baby taste of what it's like to be inside crew, to get a taste of what it's like to learn from me, to get a taste of what it's like to be part of the Quilting Rockstar membership or community, and to get a taste of the different types of support and live events that we have together inside crew. So keep your ears open for those details. You may have already seen an invite in your inbox this morning, and if not, you'll definitely be getting some from me over the course of the weekend. All right, ready to dive in? Any questions thus far about our trajectory, our goals, and how amazing you are? Yeah? I'm going to take a sip of water. I know I talk a mile a minute. Myra says, I have a long arm and I'm new to quilting. Oh, Myra, we're going to have so much fun. It's going to be fabulous. Kim says, I've sewed for over 60 years. I love it. Leslie says, if I were more confident, I would not be so slow to tackle my flimsy pile. I have great news for you, Leslie. We are going to build that confidence brick by brick. You're going to be a new rock star before you know it. All right. Lena, welcome all the way from Alaska. I hope you're staying warm. Let's dive in. Today is all about preparing your space and preparing yourself. Okay. This is all the prep work that in many ways you kind of do, and it's like a one and done. Or as you continue, you're going to spend less and less time on it. But if we don't lay this foundation, all the steps that come later can become very overwhelming very quickly. Okay. This is also where I find that there's a lot of ground we can cover of things it's hard to find tutorials for. I don't know if any of y'all have had this experience, but when I was first learning how to quilt my own quilts, it was the little things that were the hardest because it was difficult to find information about all of those little in-betweeny steps, things that often don't get captured on video or they get edited out because they're not cute, right? So a lot of the groundwork when we're going to be laying today is trying to answer some of those questions that maybe you've bumped up against them and they kind of flag in your brain as, I'm probably supposed to know this already. And then you don't know how to ask, right? Because your brain immediately is like, everyone knows that, but you're such a beginner. Ew, right? And it's just your brain being sassy. So I want to give you a permission slip right now. There is no question too basic. There's no question too foundational. We're going to go through step by step. And if there's something you're wondering about that I don't cover, drop it in the chat box. All right. Shelly from Trinidad and Tobago, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. All right. Let's prepare our quilting space. These are the supplies you need to quilt your quilts. Okay. You need a sewing machine. You need a free motion quilting foot or a ruler foot. You need some quilting rulers. You need sewing machine needles, thread, practice sandwiches. That's just like a fat quarter of fabric with some batting and then another fat quarter on top, right? These are just easy peasy little pieces that you can practice on. And if you treat them like my kids treat a ream of printer paper, right? We're going to fill them up. We're going to draw all over them. And if it becomes a thing, great. And if it doesn't, you got the practice. Okay. And then you need a paper and pen because it's way less scary to practice on paper than it is to practice on fabric. Okay. Let's go through these things one by one. What kind of sewing machine do you need? You need the sewing machine that you already have. Okay. If you start quilting your own quilts and you fall in love with the process and at some point you want to upgrade your sewing machine, I will be the first person to write you a permission slip for that. But right now, this weekend is all about what friction points can we remove? And the sewing machine that you have can probably do the job to get you started. I started free motion quilting on a $97 hand-me-down Kenmore. It was this big, right? And it had a tiny little throat space. Right? But it got me started. It allowed me to learn the basics. And then I was able to get a bigger sewing machine later. If you have a big sewing machine already, maybe some of you have a long arm that you're kind of scared that if you look at it sideways, it might combust into glitter. That's totally normal. Your long arm is going to do the job too. Okay. And I have quilted on all the things and I can help you understand how yours works. Okay. The biggest thing that you're going to need to make your sewing machine work for you is you're going to need the right presser foot. Okay. So on the screen here, you can see a number of different free motion quilting and ruler quilting feet. Those first two on the left, the ones that have the little spring, those are called hopping feet, okay? The easiest type of foot to find for just about any machine is going to be that one on the far left, that plastic little hopping foot. It has an oval foot at the bottom that floats right on top of your fabric so you can move your quilt around freely as you're quilting. The one smack in the middle with the tall sides is called a ruler foot. This is my personal favorite foot because I can use a quilting ruler with it, or I can just do free motion quilting. This is a fixed ruler foot, meaning it doesn't hop up and down, but they also make a lot of ruler feet that hop up and down like those ones on the left, okay? And then we get into some kind of specialty feet further on. So that clear one is called a glide or a spoon foot. You most often see feet like this for long arms, and they're specifically designed to go over really bumpy seams, okay? And then that final one is a darning foot. This is my least favorite of the free motion quilting feet, but it is sometimes one that you'll find that comes with older machines, and sometimes it works as a place to get started, okay? In addition to putting that proper presser foot on your machine, by the way, the question I get all the time is, I already have a machine. How do I find a foot for it? If you have a machine that you bought at a dealer, I recommend going to your local dealer, right? And walk in the door and say, I have this machine from the brand that you carry. Can you please help me find a free motion or a ruler quilting foot for it? That's going to be the best way to find a foot that you know is going to work for your machine. If you have a big box machine, so something that you maybe bought at Joann or Walmart or Michael's, or you got handed down to you, right? Then usually a universal presser foot would work, and you can usually just Google the machine that you have with free motion quilting foot, and you'll find listings for where you can buy those feet online. All right. There's always the chance that you'll need to try a foot or two before you find the right one, but don't worry, it's not that big a deal, and the foot for your machine exists out there. Okay. The next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need needles, right? Hello, Gloria in Greensboro. You're going to need needles. I recommend a size 14 or 16. If you're on the long arm, you're going to use a 16 or maybe even an 18. On a regular sewing machine, it's a universal needle, right? Sometimes I use ballpoint needles. They're a little bit gentler on your fabric. Some people really like sharps because they cut through your fabric a little bit more. The biggest thing is that you want a fresh needle, and you want to make sure that it's on the bigger side, right? This is not a time for a size 9. Moving your fabric all different directions, it's too easy to break the needle, okay? So size 14 or size 16, it gives you a little bit of a stronger shaft on that needle, and it gives you a larger eye so that the thread can move through cleanly without fraying or breaking. Patchwork Peanut asked an incredibly important question. Please tell me that it's normal to be afraid of using my long arm. It is so normal. So normal. And I can take some ganders at why, right? A long arm is car money, right? You have made an investment. It is also a room of your house. So you've invested money and space in this thing that you want to make your quilting easier. And then it feels overwhelming because it is this big. And you're very nervous that if you plug it in and turn it on and look at it sideways, right, that it's going to go, nope, you did it wrong. And the whole thing is just going to like short out and combust into glitter, right? So normal. But here's the thing. It's car money because like a car, it's meant to be used. Okay. Long arms are so durable. The chances of you doing serious damage to it are quite small. And I see that Jan is already in the chat telling her story because listen, Jan is the expert on this. Because Jan, how many years did you have your long arm and you were scared of it before you started quilting? And then how long was it from when you started quilting to when you would change the thread? Because those were some long periods of time. And as Jan has dropped in the chat, she's now quilted over 50 quilts on her long arm. And I believe you recently described it as your best friend. So don't you worry. You're gonna move from feeling nervous to feeling really confident so soon. You're in exactly the right place. Speaking of thread, the last thing that you need is you're going to need a really quality thread for quilting your quilts. Personally, I love Aurifil 50 weight cotton. Okay. I like cotton thread for a number of reasons. One, I'm just a natural fiber girly. I love natural fibers wherever I can. See, years went by before Jan felt confident. We're going to shorten that learning curve for you, Patchwork Peanut. Okay. I'm a natural fiber girly. I love it. I also really like dense quilting. And if I use cotton thread on cotton fabric with cotton batting, I can quilt that quilt as densely as I want, and it's still going to be nice and soft and squishy. Okay. So you can quilt all the stitches on your quilt, and it's going to come out looking beautiful and still be really, really soft using that cotton thread. I use cotton thread on both my domestic and my long arm machines. I know that's something that surprises people often. Is a lot of folks think you have to use a poly thread on a long arm machine. I use 50 weight cotton for basically all of my quilts with great success, and it looks stunning. Okay. The other reason I like 50 weight is it's really fine and it makes it a lot easier to balance your tension. Okay. Jan says, after I took your class, I would change the thread. She and I are besties now. I love that machine. There you go. I love it, Jan. So fear not. You're in exactly the right place. You may also want some quilting rulers. So quilting rulers are different than cutting rulers because they're very thick. Okay. And they're designed, I don't know if y'all remember the little gear toys that Spirograph. I'm like, the word is going to come to me. I don't know if y'all remember Spirograph I had it in the 90s, but remember, I'm an infant baby child, so I know that they predate me, right? But you'd put your pen in one and you put the two gears down and it would make all these cool shapes on your paper, right? Quilting rulers work with a very similar principle that you can kind of put them up against that tall ruler foot. And if you're on the domestic machine, you can then glide the whole thing together to make different shapes. Or if you're on the long run, you can hold that ruler in place and guide the machine around it. Okay. This is a great way to add some geometric touches to your quilt, to do straight lines for things like stitch in the ditch, and just generally broaden your horizons of what's possible. Okay. As you get all set up, you're going to want to make sure your machine is nice and clean. I've already said that whatever machine you have, it's probably the right one to get you started, but it does need to be in good working order. So we've talked about what you need. You need to have the machine, you need to have the right foot, you need a fresh needle and some really great thread. Okay. As you're setting it up, make sure your machine is nice and clean. So you're going to want to brush all the lint out. Don't ever blow lint into your machine. It will mess up your motor and electronics. Not good. Okay. Lint out. Okay. Oil it per the guidelines that are in your manufacturer's directions. Okay. Or your dealer's directions. And make sure you've got that fresh needle in there. I change the needle approximately every project. If you don't remember the last time you changed the needle on your machine, it's time to change it. Okay. That's the rule of thumb. There's our supplies. Okay. The other thing that I always like to recommend, and we're going to hope I have them in my drawer. I don't. I'm going to reach over here and grab a pair, is I love a quality pair of quilting gloves. The Swan Amity gloves are my favorite. And not just because I'm friends with the owner of the company. I always love to tell this story. Here, I'll pull these slides down for a second. When we were at QuiltCon Phoenix, not this last time, but back in 2022, I had not found a pair of quilting gloves that I really liked. So at the time, I kind of was like, quilting gloves, I can take them or leave them, right? Which is wild behavior when I think about that now. And Swan and her husband had a booth at the show, just 2 booths down from me. And I recently heard this story from Swan's perspective because I was like, yeah, your husband brought those gloves down and like I kind of blew them off and I feel really bad about that. And she was like, oh, but you don't even know about the conversation that had already happened in our booth. And apparently her husband was like, I want to take some gloves down to Holly Ann. I think she'd really like them. I think she, may end up falling in love with them and recommending them. And Swan was like, no. I heard her talking about how she doesn't use gloves. And Clayton was like, whatever, I'm going to take him down there anyway. So he brings me a pair of gloves. He's like, we would like to gift you a pair of gloves. And I was like, oh, that's so kind. Thank you. But I will be honest, I kind of blew them off because I was like, gloves, whatever. Because I'd tried a bunch of pairs of gloves and I didn't like any of them, right? Like they were fine, but I didn't feel like they added enough to my quilting experience for how they felt on my hands. I had to send Clayton an apology email because I am obsessed with these gloves. Okay. I love the way that they have the mesh and the cut fingers so my hands don't get too hot. The chamois on the palm creates a lovely grip on your quilt, but it's not plastic. So it can't like pick off over time. And the key thing that Swan solved is I always had to take my glove off to be able to touch the touch screens on my machines. And these little fingertips are touch screen sensitive. So the final item that I recommend that you have is a fabulous pair of quilting gloves. And yes, of course, we carry these at String and Story. Okay. There's all of our supplies. Any questions about that so far? Because I know sometimes it feels like you have to have 150 million things to learn a new task, right? Quilting is a hobby of many notions. There's all the things available, but I really try to consolidate down what do you really need in order to be successful quilting your own quilts. And it's really basic stuff. You need your machine, your needles, your thread. You need the right foot. Might want some rulers. You're going to want some gloves. And then, of course, some fabric. Okay? Good deal? Holly says, do you use gloves on the long arm? Great question. I do not. I could see a scenario in which having a glove on the hand that's holding my ruler could potentially be helpful. But that, yeah, I've never done it that way because I don't feel like it is actually necessary. I'm grabbing a link to the gloves so you can see it written out. They're Swan Amity quilting gloves. There you go. They're phenomenal. Great question. What is the purpose of using the gloves? So gloves are twofold. In the simplest way, they keep things like oil, dirt, snack crumbs off your quilt. The more important piece for you, though, is they're going to reduce your hand strain. So one of the things that can happen, especially when you're quilting on the domestic, is you end up kind of gripping the fabric with your fingers to be able to move it, especially if it's a big, heavy quilt, right? And these gloves give you extra friction on the palms of your hands. So then instead of having to strain all the tiny little muscles through your, I mean, that just looks painful, right? Like picture me gripping a quilt and think about how painful this is going to be through all these little muscles. When I use gloves, I can keep my hands flat and allow pressure and friction to move my quilt. So I fatigue a lot less easily. I'm less prone to injury. If you have any kind of joint or muscle issues or inflammation issues in your hand, this is going to reduce all of that. Great question, Carrie. I love that. Melinda says, I love the honesty about your attitude towards the gloves and changing your mind. You know, Melinda, one of the things I really want to be committed to as an educator is when I learn new and better stuff that I pass that along. And there are ways in which my advice has changed over the last 10 years. And these gloves are one of them. Eve says, where can I get the gloves? That link that I just dropped in the chat. They are available in our shop at stringandstory.com or shop.stringandstory.com. Fabulous. Great questions. All right, let me pop my slides back up and we're going to head into the next part, which, Carrie, you dovetailed us in so beautifully. How do I make sure we quilt without pain, right? Often I see when folks are learning how to quilt their own quilts, they try to get started. And the first roadblock is, what stuff do I need, right? And finding good information about what things you really need versus other things that are just available and maybe nice to have. The next roadblock is I tried to quilt my own stuff and it hurt, right? Moving a whole quilt underneath the machine made me sore. It made me fatigued. I didn't feel like I had good control. How can I fix that? I'm so glad, Carrie. So let's talk about pain-free quilting. This is another one of those things that I don't think gets enough airtime, and I am happy to give it. Ergonomic posture and a proper quilting setup are absolutely vital to a pain-free quilting experience. There are 3 keys to healthy posture. Okay. So when I describe healthy posture, I'm wanting you sitting tall. I want you to feel strong. I want you to be able to use the largest muscle groups possible to maneuver your quilt, right? We just talked about how if we're not using gloves, we tend to grip with our hands and use all these tiny little muscles. But if we can put our hands flat, we get to use bigger muscles like our triceps and our delts, our upper back, to move instead. Okay. So let's talk about how we achieve those things. First, I want your table to be high enough or low enough, right? The top of your quilting surface. So where the bed of your machine is should fall. And I'm going to tilt this down so you can see right at the bottom of your rib cage. Okay. Because see, when I put my hands at a right angle, if I'm pushing on a quilt, my elbow is landing right at the bottom of my ribs. This nice 90-degree angle means I can move my arms using the muscles back here, not the muscles down here. Okay. So I want my machine to be here. We have a tendency, I'll give you my face for a second. We have a tendency, because this is what works in our lives, right? We have the dining room table, we slap the sewing machine on top, and then we quilt. But here's what happens when you do that, right? The dining room table is at a height that you can eat soup without dribbling down your chin. Okay. So it's a really high table. Then you put your sewing machine on top of that. And then one of 2 things happens. You're either trying to control your quilt like this, with my shoulders scrunched up to my ears and my elbows all bent, and I'm using these muscles and my like rotator cuffs a lot. So right along here and right here, these are little muscles that get injured easily. Or I end up lifting everything up like this and doing this. And again, notice that my shoulders are up in my ears, right? And you can probably think about how much that's going to hurt just by putting your body in that position. And then imagine moving a big heavy quilt and you're using all of these shoulder muscles at funky angles, right? So we want that table down lower so we can be at a 90-degree angle. Notice too that my body is sitting nice and tall, right? My shoulders are over my hips and my spine and ribs are tall in the middle and my head is resting on top. I have that same 90-degree angle going down through my hips and my knees. So again, I can use the strong, big muscles of my core and my back instead of all the little muscles everywhere, okay? Terry says, I have back pain when using the long arm. So these same principles apply, Terry, for the long arm. We want our frame to be at the right height, that we're getting that same 90-degree angle down through our arms. We want to stand as tall as possible and engage that core. We don't want to be hunched over or bent over when we're quilting, okay? I've got a photo that I'm going to show you in a minute so you can see this side by side, but it's very easy for that to happen on a long arm as well. Oh, Vic asked a question about feet. I said, I have a free motion quilting foot with my FAF Ambition 2, but my book does not say how to attach it. You probably just unscrew your other foot and replace it with the free motion quilting foot. Yeah. Roberta says, is there a way to change the height of the table rather than the chair? Great question. So being able to drop your machine into the table is going to help. I have known folks that if you're not using your dining room table, like if you're using a desk, you can literally trim the legs of your table. Or I'm a big fan of the Aero sewing chair because it goes up really high, right? So playing around with that, I've heard every solution there is, from dropping machines down into the tables to cutting the legs of the table shorter, to putting the chair on boosters, to sitting on a phone book. All of these are options, right? Whatever you can do to get your body and your table at the right proportion, okay? The final thing I really want you to think about is I want you to think about your lighting, right? I've actually got a slimline lamp shining on my face right now that I'm using so that I'm nice and lit up for y'all, but it's the same light that I like to use when I'm quilting. Past the age of 30, we need 20% light, 20% more light with every decade in order to prevent eye strain. So yes, having a really quality overhead light or good natural light in your space is going to help. But I would argue that every single one of us needs a quality task light. It's going to be a light that is right there by our sewing machine that we can shine directly on what we're doing so that we can look with our eyeballs instead of hunching forward with our shoulders. Okay. Erin says, how do you adjust the angle of your knees when you raise your chair height? Great question. Again, I've heard every solution that there is, from getting a chair that has a place that you can kind of rest your feet above the wheels, like how I'm doing on the chair I'm in right now, to putting a box underneath your feet, to putting one of those like shoe racks under there to raise your presser foot up. Yeah, all of the options. I know. It's a little bit of a experiment to figure out what works best for you and your space and your body, right? Because we all have slightly different proportions. This is where, as you are able, and if you are interested, this is where like sewing specific furniture can become really helpful. But there's a lot of workarounds before you have to invest in a whole piece of furniture. Great question. Let's make sure you're sitting like a rock star. So you can see here on the left, sitting nice and tall with that 90-degree angle like I talked about. And in this case, you can see my sewing machine is sitting on top of the table. It's not down in the table. This also works great with it sunk down in, right? What I see so often is here on the right, where we're trying to see what we're doing and we end up hunched forward, squinting, and having a hard time getting in there without having a lot of pain in our bodies, okay? Leslie Johnson says, shoe rack, question mark. You know, like those little like shelves that you can put shoes on? I've literally had rock stars like put one of those under their sewing table and use it as a footrest because it's a good place to put your foot pedal too. I know, the solutions are plentiful. Remember, we want to use the largest muscle groups possible for all tasks. And even those muscles are going to fatigue, especially if you're not used to sitting up tall, right? Most of us, I think our tendency is to sit back on our tailbone instead of up over our pelvis. And learning how to sit tall like that is going to engage your core in a way that you may not be used to. So as you get started, yes, I want you to make sure you have an ergonomic setup. Yes, I want you to make sure that you are sitting tall or standing tall as you are quilting. And I want you to take frequent breaks. I want you to stretch. I want you to hydrate. Think about working in little snack size bits of time, 15, 20, 25 minutes, not a big like 30-hour marathon, right? I think often we think I'm going to sit down and quilt this quilt and we think we're going to quilt the whole thing in one sitting. and then we try to power through hours and hours of painful work. No, I want you to just work through little bits at a time and let those chunks of time stack on each other. Your body will get stronger, you will feel more confident, and it'll help reduce pain and inflammation. Terry says, I guess I need a floodlight. You probably just need a daylight slim line. Like a good quality LED task light will do what you need it to do, Terry. Don't you worry. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to show you some quilting motifs that you'll actually use to get started quilting your own quilts. And if you have questions about anything from today, do go ahead and drop those in the chat as I'm going over this next bit, because I have a tiny bit of homework for you. Today, we have talked all about how to gather your supplies and prepare your machine, your space, and your body to get started. So I want you to put that into practice this evening. Go putter in your sewing space and figure out a setup that works for you. Organize your sewing space, make sure you have the supplies you need to succeed, including a little project to work on this weekend. That could be a panel, that could be a couple of orphan blocks. Maybe you've got a small little quilt top that you're going to quilt up, but go ahead and gather everything that you need so that you're ready for the days ahead. Then I want you to join me again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern for quilting motifs that you can actually use and put into practice. We're going to talk about some of the motifs that are included in that Quilt Your First Project with Confidence workbook and start moving you towards what the heck do I quilt wear, towards how do I quilt it, and let's get it done. Okay? Before you go, I do just want to remind you that the doors to Quilting Rockstar University are open and you are invited. I know for some of you, we are just starting to get to know each other, but I want to mention Crew each day because it's a really special community where you can take everything you're learning with me this weekend and begin to put it into practice at an even deeper level. Crew is going to give you the ability to finally feel the joy and creativity that you crave with my online courses and live support. Plus, and I know I'm biased, the best quilting community on the internet. Gail is part of Crew, and she says, I loved learning how to use rulers to make different shapes for backgrounds, fillers, and borders. I love Holly-Ann's realness in her teaching and her positive, encouraging attitude. Quilting Rockstar University includes over $2,500 of educational resources, plus a ton of live support. Free Motion Quilting Academy, Ruler Quilting Academy, Custom Quilting Academy, and Long Arm Prep. That's especially great for those of you that are scared of your long arm. And it includes quarterly custom quilting masterclasses, monthly sit and sews, weekly live Q&As, and our amazing online community. And all of this is available for you for just $37 a month. Doors are open until February 23rd, so you're welcome to keep getting to know me over the course of the weekend before you jump in. But for those of you that have already said, this is for me, I love this learning style, I want to do more of this, there's no need to wait. You can go ahead and dive on in. And as Jan said, Crew is fantastic. And I know that I'm biased, but you know. I saw one question go by. Cindy says, what are the best pens for holding the quilt together as well as best spray adhesive? Cindy, ditch the pens. And in that first or the second workbook that I had you download, the Quilt Your First Project with Confidence, you're going to find a recipe for homemade spray based. It is essentially a homemade glue that you make with either flour, cornstarch, or rice flour. I was like, there's something else that works in rice flour. And you're essentially going to glue the layers of your quilt together. And then all of it just washes out when you wash the quilt. But I found it to be the most secure way to get everything ready to roll. Okay. I've dropped the link for Crew down there in the chat. I'm scrolling to see, I saw a couple of other questions. Gloria says, I'm finally good friends with my long arm machine. I love that. Penny, if you are here local to me, we do have a couple of in-person classes coming up. You can find those online in our shop. And I teach at shows periodically throughout the year. Great question. None of those are going to dive quite as deep as Crew does, but they can also be a wonderful place to get started. I'm going to drop one more link for those of you who are wondering about the workbooks. Both workbooks are available on this page. Let's see. Carla says, I joined Free Motion Quilting Academy and I quilted my first border last night. Carla, that's amazing. I love that so much. Rockstars, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited to welcome you in to the Quilting Rockstar community. I hope I'll be seeing a lot of y'all in Crew as well. But in the meanwhile, please head to your sewing room, get all set up, and join me back here tomorrow for another hour of taking your learning to the next step and getting you one step closer to finishing those quilts with confidence, as I know you can. Val says, will you manage to cover using Procreate to help with designs? We will talk about it a little bit, Val. Yes. Yes, the lives are available for replay until February 23rd. And Ann says, Lake Oconee Quilt Guild loves you. I love you too. I would love to come back. So send me an email. All right. Y'all are fabulous. Thanks for joining me. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.